So today, on request of Sheikh Saeed Al-Salami, I've prepared a little bit of a documentation, anecdotally, of my trip to Iraq that many of you took, that many of you know that I took last year. And it's just going to include some aspects of culture, religion, and just information that I faced along the way. So a little bit about me. I graduated last year from high school, and towards the end of the year, I would say I was kind of already thinking about post-HSC, post-trials, what I was going to do, what was going to happen. And I realized, I looked around myself and I saw that a lot of people after year 12 waste a lot of time because really there's not much to do in that space of time. And I saw it as an opportunity. So I kind of discussed it with my dad. I thought, why not turn this waste of time into something that could be very beneficial for me? And obviously, to decide on a place, it was standard that it was going to be some place where I could, experience ziyarah, experience hawza, obviously so much historical and religious significance, and learning and exploring. I already had a little bit of interest in learning the language Arabic. I'd started in year 10 in English classes where we would go, and instead of focusing on English, I would sit next to my friend Ali, and we would exchange words in Arabic. I used to use videos like this to do so. And during HSC, I realized that, as mundane as life was moving, it wasn't going to be worth me impeding this into my holidays as well. And I realized that all of year 12 and year 11 kind of sucked the life out of me. The interactions were at an all-time low, indicated by, I literally saw a couple of friends today, and I realized that, I hadn't seen them in a long time. And when you're in year 12, time moves so quickly and so efficiently that you don't even realize that, you're not getting human-to-human interaction. You're not meeting your friends. You're not meeting people that you'd want to meet. You're missing out on life skills. So I realized that, during HSC, that lady at the bottom, that's what I looked like as a result of the picture on the top. It was, there was nothing going for me last year. It was study, study, study. And that really just dragged the life out of me. My exposure with friends and everything was all, it was low. And so I realized that I was losing this cultural competency, street smarts as people call them. So that's when I decided to obviously take advantage of this opportunity in this free time. So I contemplated visiting Najaf with my father. And, we first talked about the value of visiting Najaf. Then we thought about, obviously, the complications that would be associated with visiting Iraq. And I realized that, I didn't have any close relatives or friends that lived in Iraq. So that would have been a complication. There was many complications, right? I was 17, so traveling abroad for the first time, it's often a little bit unnerving. And, just going to a new place, new culture, new language, it got to me initially, but ultimately I thought about the risk and reward ratio. And at the time it seemed like, well, if I go to this new place, whereas I could sit at home and, watch YouTube for 3 months, but the reward was so high, but at the same time, I thought the risk was so high as well. And I wasn't really sure whether it was worth doing this at the time, but we made a timely decision and I decided to go. So yeah, just kind of summarizing most things. On the flight to Najaf, it was, if you've been to Najaf, you know that it's not often as it looks like, it's not like this picture that you see. It's not the first thing that comes to you. It's the bottom. It's like, it's quite open, broad. It's a different environment. And, I landed in the airport. First problem I faced, language, right? I'm not ethnically Arab, but I was there in Najaf International and no one spoke English, which was interesting. But on the way, thankfully, there was a lot of, obviously, Iraqi people heading back home. So almost every single person on the flight was annoyed because I was asking them, I was trying to speak to them in Arabic. Ultimately, I arrived in Najaf after landing, I met up with a friend of my dad, and for a couple of days, he said, just explore. And initially, I was like, well, I don't need 3 days. I don't need 4 days. I can just get started with Hausa and whatnot. But I realized that adapting to life in a different country was quite different. You guys might recognize the shops like that. So that's a picture I took from Souq and Najaf. And I kind of survived off of this food for a couple of days. And I went around using these people at the bottom, taxis, Siyaras Ghaira they call it. And the first couple of days, I kind of realized that, it's not going, a new experience isn't as easy as it sometimes seems. It's not as hard, but it's confronting. It's very confronting, I'll say that. Communication was very important. I'd go to the shops, and if I wanted a banana, I'd say, هذا أصفر. And then they'd be like, شنو يعني شو تريد? Only later I realized it was called muz. But initially, I didn't know it, so I just pointed to it. And, communication, it's a very important thing. So initially, my mum was obviously worried about me eating. My dad couldn't care less. He was like, they're your problems now, and you've got to worry about it. And I think a blend of the two were important, because I needed to take care of yourself. Everyone needs to take care of themselves. But at the same time, you need to understand that difficulties can arise, right, whenever, and you need to be able to confront them. And then I moved to Hausa. So I was taken to Maktab Sayyid Hakim. And what I thought it looked like was the picture that you guys can see here. And although this is the higher level of Hausa, my Hausa was literally like we're sitting here. It was a person, he was sitting down, he had his book open, a fiqh, and he was just reading. Far more simpler than I thought. And the perception of, these grand classes kind of just shattered. The Maktab of Sayyid Hakim, they offered me, so they were like, okay, you can study in a foreigner Hausa, because there is that opportunity. They said you can study in a foreigner Hausa, you can study in an Indian Pakistani Hausa, or you can study in an Arab Hausa. But we wouldn't recommend that because you won't be able to talk to anyone. But I chose to live with Iraqis because I thought that ultimately that would be most beneficial. So I ended up walking into a Hausa where I had about 30 odd new faces all looked at me, and they were like, Salamu alaikum, shlomo habibi. And I'm like, I didn't understand that. I was like, what's going on? And, then they look at me and they're like, this guy doesn't speak Arabic. What is he doing here? In Iraq, in Najaf, in Hausa, what is he doing? And that was, it was an interesting experience. But eventually, you get used to these things. In my room, I had two very high level scholars with me. They were both in the Hausa for 10, 15 years. The food I ate, everyone had to make their own food. I used to eat street food a lot. Cooking was not something I was very good at, but I tried getting something together. The friends I made, over time, we developed a very strong bond. Even though initially our communication wasn't as strong as I thought it was going to be, the people around me, once they got to know me, it was an extremely brotherly bond. I would say there was foreigners there as well, more than I thought there were going to be. And initially, it seemed like me stepping into this country was like me against this country. Everyone was kind of against me. But slowly I learned that it was all about assimilating myself into the challenge that I had. And obviously, this is a very specific experience to me. But the goal is that you understand that no matter where you go, there's going to be challenges. Not just in a physical sense. You could be in Australia, in Sydney, in Auburn. But challenges come with any task. Speaking of tasks, I had an interview for uni admission at the same time. We had a little bit of a problem with time zone. As many of you know, Iraq is 8 or 9 hours behind Australian time. So this university admission, I think it was scheduled for somewhere in December, and I woke up and I expected to log into my email and just join the Zoom. And all of a sudden I see 10 unread messages and I realize that I've woken 1 hour too late because of daylight savings. So now I've missed the interview. And, you know, this might be a little cliche, but I did, in fact, this is the first time I went to the Haram of Imam Ali, and I did make a sincere dua. And then, literally, when I came back from the Haram, I had an email and they'd rescheduled my interview. My interaction with shuyukh. So, when I got there, I was obviously in Hawza learning what Hawza has to provide. And what I found was that the environment in the Hawza was such a beautiful environment because everyone around you is a scholar of the religion. They're all trying to get better in their own way, and it promotes a culture of unity. And it really forms a really beautiful community. So I got there and I realized that, you know, I have something to offer, which is my English skills. And so I did offer to do that. Connections that I formed were with other sheikhs, and I realized, like, I thought it was all going to be, you know, Iraqis there, but I realized there was people from Africa, there was people from the Philippines, there was people from Indonesia, there was people from all over the world that were in Najaf studying in Arabic. And that really motivated me because I thought initially, you know, as I said, I thought it was me versus Iraq, but I realized that this is a place of religion. It's a center of just religion, and everyone from around the world was here learning. Obviously, just, you know, for one central goal, which was to learn and grow in the religion, and that became my inspiration from that point on. I met a lot of people, including Sheikh Muhsin al-Hakim's son, Ayatollah Sheikh Muhsin Hakim, and, you know, we had such an eventful chat. We talked about how his experience. Obviously, he grew up. He was a third generation Hawza member. He grew up in Iraq. I grew up in Australia. We had very similar perspectives. We had very similar thoughts. We had very similar experiences, and we found a lot of the same things enjoyable. So, some of the challenges that I found with interacting with other shuyukh was their age and experience often. So, when I'm meeting someone, you know, like you guys are around my age, kind of similar experiences. We've grown up in this country. But I talk to them and I realize these guys are 34, 35, even older. They have 10, 15 years in Hawza. They're obviously far more competent than me in terms of Islamic affairs. But conversations just flowed. We would start talking and they start mentioning like Aiden Ross. And I'm like, you guys live in Iraq. And it was a great surprise to me because I was like, I thought people, I guess it was a wrongful perception, but I thought people there were, they didn't know what goes on in real life. I thought it was like a very kind of, you know, little prison. But I realized that these people are more connected than me in most ways at double my age. The rewards, obviously. One of the most beautiful things I saw in Iraq was that religion and culture were ingrained. Not mostly, but I'm talking specifically about Hawza here. So, you know, people would joke around and they joke about Islamic affairs. Not in that way, but they'd include their religion in their talks, in their conversations, in their jokes. Unlike what I've found here is that when we talk about religion, it's like, okay, well, now we're talking about religion, now we're talking about football, now we're talking about whatever, entertainment. But there it was like, they'll talk about entertainment and they'll relate it back to Islam. I found that very nice. Obviously, you know, I was there and everyone's speaking Arabic. And although Ali Shamlan helped me a little bit in learning Fasih, I went there. كنت قاعد وياهم ما فهمت شيء. I was like, dude, I've spent a year learning Arabic and I still don't understand anything. And then قررت يعني لازم من أدرس لهجة, or they call it Jilfi there or something like that. And what I realized was that the lessons that I learned from Hawza, they transcended religion. As I said, you know, my trip was very much me realizing that Hawza is not just a secular religion, extremist even it's labeled. It's not those. They're normal people. They have goals. One of the subjects that we studied was Mantiq. And as many of you know, mantiq, uh, it's logic. It's literally how the brain operates. It's how neurons connect. It's when you deduce something, it's if you say, this cow is white and then this cow has milk or whatever, you make a connection between those two things. And a lot of it comes down to your communication and, they even taught analytical skills. So I was surprised that the Hausa was so inclusive of everyday affairs. Just a little observation. Being in Iraq, there was a lot of decisional skills, and I think I can relate this to just living in Australia in general. Everything requires you to make decisions, right? And as males, you have somewhat of an even more responsibility to be that decisive figure in your family. And often what I realized was that at home, I wouldn't make any decisions. Like, it'd be my dad or it'd be someone else, it'd be community members. I'd just go to school, I'd study, I'd sleep, and I'd eat, and I'd repeat. There was no decision making happening. There's nothing at stake, right? But here, things are at stake. If I decided not to go out in the souk and buy something, I knew I was going to be hungry that night. So kind of having that motivation, having those skills to decide what you want and to go and do it was probably the thing that I found benefited me most. Benevolence. So as you guys already know that culture makes a big difference on how people treat each other. Obviously, people in Iraq are very benevolent. At first, although, I will make this complaint. At first, everyone seems cold. You talk with them, they think you're like Saudi, and they'll just like kick you away. They'll be like, oh, sorry. But then later, as we kind of talked more and whatnot, these people, my roommates, one of my roommates took my phone. I put in Iraqi SIM in. The whole menu's in Arabic. And not just like simple, like, Amiya. It's like Fusha, like heavy. And I'm just like, I don't know how to put data in. And so he takes it for a day, goes back home to Basra, and sets it up for me, and then brings it back. So, he had nothing to do with it. Teachers were putting in extra time. One of my teachers for, what was it? For fiqh. He said, look, I know you have trouble understanding some things. If you want, stay back after class. This is at no benefit to him. He's like, stay back after class and I'll explain whatever words you need me to. Luckily, Google Translate exists, so I didn't need that. But, even shopkeepers, I'm like, okay, how much is this? And they're like, 5,000 habibi. I'm like, I don't have 5,000. Can you just give me like 3,000? And he's like, no, khud. And he's like, okay. It's, these people, I found them so dedicated in what they do that these little altercations didn't make their blood boil. It was just normal part of everyday life. So they had these things called tala in the Hausa, which is, I think, between Thursday morning and Sunday morning. They have a weekend, essentially. It's not that deep. It's just people go home to Baghdad, to Basra, to Nasri, or whatever. It was a little hard for me to come to Auburn every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So, unfortunately, I stayed in Najaf. Where is the Tala? Here. No, never mind. I'll come back. Continuing on that point. So, the culture in Iraq and in most Western countries, against Australia, Western country, was the benevolence and the generosity of people. As I already mentioned, there was a collectivist kind of ideology there. People very, very willing to... If you stop someone on the street in Australia, if you stop someone on the street and you try to have a discussion with them for more than 10 seconds, if it's anything more than asking them directions, they will let you go because they don't have the time. And if in Iraq, if I asked someone for directions, they'd be like, okay, they'd hold my hand, bring me to that place, say, do you want anything more? They'd offer me money. That happens sometimes. And so I was surprised because obviously, I've grown up in a very individualistic society where everyone looks out for themselves. And something we can learn is to, because Islam promotes a collectivist society, doesn't promote individuality, doesn't promote living in a family of four and leaving your parents in a nursing home. It doesn't do that. Family values are very important. A little observation about Najaf. So there's like a Medina Qadima and a Medina Jadida. And so I was very happy to see development and progress. There's an organization by the name of Al-Ataba. They've separated from the government, and essentially what they did is back in the day when Daesh were in control of a lot of Iraq, they would withhold the shrines from the Muslims, from Shi'is in particular. And what Al-Ataba tried to do was that they said, despite any political affiliations, no matter what happens politically, if Sunnis win it, Kurds win it, Shi'is win it, the Hukuma, whoever it belongs to, these belong to us. And that was made a formal kind of agreement with the people, and I think that it's a very good thing now. If you go to Iraq, as many of you will sooner or later, you'll see that you'll see Al-Ataba everywhere. And make sure, if you can, provide a little bit of charity to these people, because they do run everything, all the shrines and the buses and everything. Lifestyle's very minimal. There was no cars in Iraq except for taxis, and everyone would walk. The food was simple. So in this tala'a, the holidays that I had, I traveled to, obviously, the ziyarat across Iraq. It was kind of cool. Well, definition of cool varies person to person, but it was kind of cool going on the road that Daesh used to have strongholds on. I used to see the little tents that they used to sleep in the things. But good security, obviously, they have, they've reclaimed it, alhamdulillah. What was different about these cities from Najaf? I would say there's a lot more caution and security, because they were a lot more, not more valuable, but a lot more detained from the rest of the people. And something that Najaf had that other cities didn't was the knowledge in the air. So when I'd walk around in Jama'ah, for example, Salat al-Jum'ah in Haram Ali, the whole 5 first rows would be people with their imamas. It was wherever I walk, I'll see someone, a scholar of At-Talab. So other places didn't really have it. It looked more like tourism, which was an observation. Obviously, this happened, weeks passed by, I had my interviews, and all of a sudden my visa's run out. Who knew? Not me, because obviously when I was talking to Najaf International Airport, they weren't telling me what was going on in English. So across translations, I realized that I was going to stay for 3 months, but my visa was there for 2 months. So then I decided to go to Mashhad, as you do. And, an observation again, Mashhad, vastly different in terms of how people were, cultures, customs, language. I didn't see a single person in Mashhad with a dishdasha. Whereas in Iraq, there was no place where a man would not be without a dishdasha. Observation. Language, obviously, I don't speak Farsi. Some stories. So because I came straight from Iraq and I went straight to the Haram in a taxi, so my phone's camera isn't very good. And so I used to have a GoPro around that big, and I used to put it behind my phone. I used to go like that when they would do the what do you call it? The checking thing, right? They don't check very much anyways, but they did. Anyways, Iran was a lot different. They're filling me up and down. It's almost inappropriate. And they find the GoPro, and they ask me where I'm from. They're speaking Arabic. They ask me where I'm from. I say Iraq. And so they take me in, they take my fingerprint, and now they're treating me like I'm some sort of agent. So I was detained at Mashhad, not airport, at Mashhad Haram. Interesting story. And then on the way back, our flight was delayed, and this was a flight full of Iraqis. So Iraqis and all their Jalal, the flight was delayed about 7-8 hours. And these men, they're screaming. At one point they sat in a circle in protest, and they just started doing some lotum or something. I'm not sure. Anyways, so back to Najaf. At this point, my father arrived for ziyarah as well. I met obviously very prominent scholars like Bashir Najafi, Muhammad Khalasi, Ahmed Hassani, Baghdadi. When you sit in the room, in the same room of these people, you notice that there's an aura emanating from them, and I don't lie when I say that. It's if they're in the corner of the room, you'll see, like, you'll feel that there's an aura there, of them, of their presence. Mannerisms very, very respectful, even at their high status. I never felt like they were being arrogant around me, or they treated people better than themselves. At the same time, I also did get the outcome of my admission, alhamdulillah. So it was a long journey, and kind of everything was happening at the same time: school, uni, hausa, everything. And this is the point. This is the part that benefits most people here. Is what I learned. And so one of the few things I learned was that here in Australia, there's 25 or so of us here sitting here. We're all identified to the same religion, to the same faith. You'll go outside. If you ask someone who the 12th Imam is, he's not going to, obviously, he's going to be like, what are you talking about, mate? That doesn't, when I was in Najaf, I realized that Najaf, Iraq, most parts of Iraq, I realized every single person around me, every single face walking, they have their own life, but we all believe in the exact same things. And so Shia Islam goes from a minority, right? Here it's just considered a minority. We're just people who have a certain set of beliefs. We're just minorities. To, it goes from that to something that engulfs society. It is a society. Shia Islam is a society. There exists a basis of religion. It's not just fundamental concepts and ideologies that we're debating. Ideological orphanage refers to you having an ideology and you having no one to back it up. Like when you don't have a father, you don't have anyone to back you up. So, here, if you make a claim, you're alone. You've got to take stand with you. But I realize that successful society like Iraq, which are functioning, which people are happy in, people are more happy in Iraq statistically than Australia. Any other Western country, in fact. And these are successful societies that have been founded upon Shia Islam. It revolves around Islam. It's not just culture and religion is tied into one. It is the religion. Obviously, as a result, people have a peaceful, comparatively much more peaceful life. And peace of life isn't found in materials, as I'm sure you guys have already heard like a million times, but it's found in spirituality and contribution, right? So me teaching someone English there, I felt very happy when I was in the classroom and they were learning whatnot. I was contributing to not those students, I was contributing to uplifting a society. Religion and culture, I've already talked about this. It's very important not to get culture and religion mixed up. In some other countries, culture can often take away from religion. When people are talking with each other, they'll talk about culture. They won't talk about religion. And then when they start talking about religion, okay, now we've shifted our conversation. But when your religion is your culture, that's when you're optimal. You see in Iraq, for example, here people, men and women, don't wear hijab in majority. Over there, no one complained. It's just a societal norm. You go out, you have to be modest, so you do it. There's no marches for like feminism and freedom, and it's just it's a societal kind of just norm. Did I learn something? Okay, so research. This is what I would preach to people. Research and learn the norms, the cultures and customs of the place you're visiting. I didn't do much, but I did to some fair extent, like introductions to people, respecting other people. I went to someone and he gave me 2 kisses on the cheek. And then I back up. And then he says, Ba'ad wahid. And I just stare at him. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what, do you want me to give you something? And then he starts coming towards me. I'm like, yo, what are you doing? And I just like back up. That was the most awkward moment I had. And later I called Ali. I was like, yo, this dude tried to move closer to me. And he was like saying, Ba'ad wahid. And he's like, oh, he just wanted to give you another kiss. I'm like, why? And he's like, I don't know, he just wanted to. I was like, okay. But important to learn traditions of the place you're going to go. Know your network before you travel, because people ultimately, not resources, not money, nothing. People will be your greatest asset anywhere, really, not just travel in real life, in your school, in your jobs. I was lucky to have a great group of Iraqi friends here that helped me along with my journey there. The one thing I will say is to always anticipate crises and consequences. So, I don't think a single thing went how I wanted it to happen or how I planned it to happen. And learning to deal with that, like the dude has done in the picture, is crisis management. And it's a very vital role because, sometimes I felt like just saying, "Oh no, I'm hopeless. I'm gonna sit here. I don't know how to say I don't know, like bir than John. I don't know how to say that in Arabic, so I'm just not gonna go and buy it." But ultimately, I did. I'd say it in. I'd say like I wanted a. I think I told some of you guys, but on the first day, I went to go buy a toothbrush, obviously, and I searched. Okay, I was like, I don't know how to say toothbrush because I haven't needed to say it. So I was like, okay, farsha. So I go to the guy and I'm like, "Htaj farsha," and then he can clearly tell, like, because I haven't said fircha, he's like, all right, this guy's ajnabi, time to scam. He charges me dash alif, 11,000 Iraqi dinar for a toothbrush. That's around $11. And then, and only like 2 months later, I realized because I didn't say fircha, he charged me that much. Whereas in actuality, a fircha is like 500. It's like maybe like 1/20 of the price. So things aren't gonna go as you planned. It wasn't a major scam. Like I didn't go into financial ruin or anything. But like, it's good to know, good to keep people around you. Good to know what you wanted to do. Organization skills. So this is something that I will preach because I didn't do very well. I didn't organize myself very well. When I got there, I didn't know entry into the house. I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't know what the difference between shisamuna and shisamun, like the samun, the thing that you eat. I didn't know what the difference was. They were like, go get me some samun. I was like, nah. What do you mean? Like, what is it called? What do you mean shisamuna? Like, it's just bread. And then learn to manage and maintain relationships. So people that have done good by you, like almost every single person I met did very well by me. I was lucky in that. People often say that some parts of Hausa can be discriminatory towards people because they think they might not have the purest of intentions, and that might be true. But and in some places that might be true. I didn't face it personally, but learn how to manage and maintain the people that do good by you, because they are a rare breed in this individualistic world. And don't pack too many clothes. It was not that cold, honestly. It was mostly my mum who was forcing me to pack clothes. But like I told her, like, Basra gets to 50 degrees in the summer. Like, it's not going to be that cold. But yeah. And most importantly, when you have issues in your life, when you have problems, you've got to keep that level of hope, because it's easy to go hopeless and just say, no, I quit. I could have said, you know what, I want to go back to Sydney, live my normal instant gratificated life where I sit home all day and I watch YouTube instead of having to go out and bargain with this dude for takhfidat. Like, I don't want to do that. But it was a sense of hope that kept me going, trust in God and, in myself. And alhamdulillah, it didn't, I wouldn't say, I don't know what I wrote perfectly. Nothing works out perfectly, but despite in the moment everything seeming like it might be against you, this is for anything, right? This is for school. If you fail a test, you'll feel like, wow, my future's gone. I failed my trials, and I was like, okay, well, my HSC is totaled now, but it ended up going fine. And you've got to have that hope and trust in yourself to know that there's always a future of anything, really. And you move with the saying inshallah, right? And mashallah, those are two opposite ends of the spectrum. One's before and one's after. And so you use that, and yeah, you just move through life. This was an observation and a situational kind of anecdote that I presented, but this really goes with anything in life. If you have an exam coming up and you're worried about it, or you're going to fail. Let's say that. In worst case scenario, you're going to fail. It's always good to just keep going with the hope, with the trust in yourself that you'll get somewhere. Whether it's not in the same place that you want to be in the first try, second try, or third try, you just got to keep going. So yeah, that's basically about it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot them now. No questions, okay. Well, yeah, that's with that. How do you end the lecture again? Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allahumma salli ala